despite having issues scoring runs and despite not dominant efforts from the starting rotation, but with help from a really good bullpen, they're 17-14. And if you want to add up what the Mariners have done over the course of the last 2 seasons, which is technically a little over half a season if you want to do the actual math, the Mariners have been 44-47. A scrappy team with limited resources being able to pull that off definitely has me encouraged. But this is a long season. I do think a lot of what is happening right now is unsustainable. And when you see guys like Ty France and their struggles of late at the plate, when you see that Kyle Lewis is getting those power numbers but is having some difficulties with consistency in the lineup, and just the idea that this Mariners lineup has a lot of guys right now that you're not 100% sure are ever going to be able to cut it hitting at the major league level, you wonder, all right, is this team right now in the midst of some sort of anomaly start, or are they on the road to a rebuild? And we had an interesting conversation on Danny and Gallant this morning with Michael Bumpus aboard about how you know when a rebuild's on the right track. And Danny used a metaphor of you're driving down a road to a place that you've never driven to before, and we're doing this the old school way. You don't have Waze or a GPS. You don't even have MapQuest. Someone gave you directions. You think that the directions are correct, and right now you got Jerry Dipoto and Scott Servais in the front seat. They are going the speed limit, and you're in the back seat along with Mariners management, and you are not sure if you're convinced that you're going the right way, and Mariners management isn't convinced that they would like them to continue driving, at least at this point in time, because the elephant in the room is that Jerry Dipoto and Scott Servais, they're coming to the end of their contracts at the end of this season. We haven't seen the extensions yet. Will we? I do feel like we are trending that way, but again, long season. What happens if the bottom completely falls out the rest of the way? Some of these injuries that have been adding up, maybe that allows for the possibility. But that leads us to the Paul Gallant Show question of the day on the most interactive sports talk show in Seattle and Washington, nay, the world. We think the Mariners are heading towards a rebuild, but we're not quite sure sitting in the backseat. What landmarks do you need to see that'll make you feel like it's going in the right direction? So let's start off on Twitter. @Gallant says, Brian responds that guys have to, at a very minimum, hit their weight in batting average. Yikes. That's not good, because it's not as if there's a bunch of hefty Seattle Mariners out there that are pushing 3 bills, you know? But that has been a struggle. Batting average, I think, is something that is no longer as important a statistic, at least when it comes to the day-to-day operations of most baseball teams. They're generally going to look at OPS. They want power. They don't really care as much about the guys who can slap the ball around and get on base, but the Mariners have a bit of power. They don't have anyone that can really create contact or that generally just consistently makes contact. That is a little concerning, and I'm hoping that you're going to see a little bit more of that from Kyle Lewis in the near future. The one good side about things is that they have been at the very least getting walks, but there have been a lot of struggles for them at the plate. And Scott Servais yesterday, the Mariners manager, said that that's their biggest opportunity for improvement.
The biggest opportunity for us to get a whole lot better is certainly offensively and consistent offense up and down our lineup. And, we struggled here. We haven't had a great homestand swinging the bats, but I think anybody knows you've been around this game long enough. It can turn. It can turn on one good night, a good inning. Guys have good at-bats and start putting it together. But it's not just one guy. I think it's a number of guys that really haven't gotten it going like we hoped they would have.
We'll see if they are actually able to get it going. I would specifically point to Evan White as the guy right now that is, I think, the low fuel marker that you have on the dashboard of your car. One that I consistently challenge whenever I'm driving my Nissan Sentra around town. It's probably not good for the car. I've been told that by people smarter with vehicles than myself. Whatever, I ain't going to change until the car forces me to change and I realize that I've been an idiot the entire way through. Some other responses. @Gallant says, one person whose name I can't say on the air says that they aren't out of contention by June. Does contention really matter as far as their path to a rebuild? Because, right now with the way that they are playing, if they continue to play this way, I imagine that they will end up losing games. And if they're not in contention, I don't think that's necessarily a sign that the rebuild isn't happening. Because right now, I really feel like they are operating with less than the resources that they would ideally like to have. I think if they're not able to hang around and the young players have come up, which is probably something that I would point to as far as in the timeline of the Mariners rebuild, which I know a lot of people hate hearing that because they feel like it's been taking place for 20 years. When those guys are above the AAA level and on your team, that's when you, I think, have to be of the mindset that you have to be in contention, not just in June, but probably in July.